watching the recording. So I'm Batul Raza, and I founded an independent consultancy called Outside the Lab. So it's something that I run outside of my day job to help scientists and science graduates to get jobs and develop in their careers outside of academia. So this presentation specifically is around how you can get a high-paying job outside the lab, even if you have little to no work experience. Because I know that when you're studying and have everything else going on in your life, it can be challenging to get work experience, either because of time or even just because it's really competitive to even get work experience nowadays, let alone a job. So I'm going to give you some strategies around how you can do that. And I will tell you a little bit about my background as well and my career path. And I think it should probably take about half an hour, so we should have some time for questions at the end. So feel free to write them down or just note them, and I will get to them after the presentation. So a summary of what we'll cover is why you already have an advantage as a STEM student or graduate when you are looking for jobs outside of a lab environment, how you can actually position your unique set of skills purely from your degree to make more successful job applications, so even if you don't have any work experience, how you can save time, energy, and effort looking for the employers who want to hire STEM students just like you, and also how to escape the unfortunately common trap of employers asking you for years of experience for seemingly entry-level roles. So we will cover all of that. And I'm just going to start with a little summary about me and my career path. So my name's Batul. I founded Outside the Lab. As I said, it's all around helping those with a science background who don't necessarily want to follow the traditional academic route. You don't necessarily maybe want to do further study, or maybe you've done further study and you want to transition from academia to a science industry role. So I founded Outside the Lab to help people with that. I actually studied biology myself at Imperial College in London, and I really very early on in my degree felt like, even though I loved the subject, I just knew that working in a lab or even just working in academia and research was not for me. I felt like I had a different set of skills that I wanted to apply. I didn't feel like I wanted to necessarily narrow my focus in terms of a specific research area and sort of work in that through a research career. And obviously research careers are great for some people, and other people may have skills that they want to use in their jobs. But I still wanted to make a contribution to the scientific world. And I know many people as well who have that desire. They have their science degree and they love the subject, but they just want to contribute to the science world in a different way. And so there are some obvious ways that you may have thought of that you can do that, and there are some other ways in other industries that you may not have heard of. But basically, I'm here to tell you that there are loads of options, and if you want to do that, I want to give you the strategies on how to basically search for a job and get a job for those types of roles. So I was really lucky because the university I went to also had a business school, and they gave us the option to add on a year of studying management after my degree. So because I knew that I wanted to apply some kind of business skills or work in more of a business environment, I decided to do a 4-year degree. So I completed my biology degree and then did management for a year. So that kind of gave me that combination of the theory to then go and work in a more management type role. So I was really looking for that blend of business and science. And as you do when you're applying for graduate jobs, you're trying to figure out what you want to do, and it's not always easy to actually make that certain decision straight away. So you're taking a little bit of a risk and experimenting a little bit at the start. So I applied to GSK's graduate scheme. So GSK's, and probably you may have heard of it, but it's an international pharmaceutical organization, and I applied for their HR Future Leaders program, so their graduate scheme. And again, it was a little bit of a shot in the dark because I didn't really know what it meant to work in HR in a practical sense, but I heard a bit about it, and I thought it might be suited to my skills. So I joined their Future Leaders program, and I had a really great time there. And that's where I actually developed my interest in supporting other people with their professional development. So it kind of shows where my interest in forming outside the lab came from a little bit. And I worked a lot with science employees, so employees who came from a scientific background, scientists who worked for the company. So in that sense, and because the pharmaceutical industry is a science-led industry, I was kind of blending my science and business skills through that role. But I still felt like I wasn't working closely enough to the science. So it's interesting when you want a non-academic position but want to go into the scientific world, there's a kind of a decision around what balance you want, how much science do you want in your job, and how much do you want to use other skills. And I felt like I wanted a bit more science in there. So through networking and conversation, I discovered the world of research management, which I hadn't not actually heard of during university. And I made a career change to that industry. So research management is essentially, in a nutshell, funding research. So when scientists apply to your organization for funding, you kind of run a process where you fund the research and then you monitor the research from a kind of project management kind of stance. And so I ran funding programs for NIHR, which is the National Institute for Health Research. And then I sort of progressed in the same field and went on to work for a not-for-profit, which is where I work now. So it's called WCRF International. So that's World Cancer Research Fund International. It's a small not-for-profit. And I now am the senior research funding manager for them. So I basically am in charge of running their grant program. So scientists will apply to us for funding, and we will monitor their funded projects as well, along with lots of other things that we do. So that's sort of my education and career journey. And as I said, I have a special interest in career and skills development in STEM. So that is the link to me creating Outside the Lab and doing this presentation. So that's me. And now I just want to go into the teaching points. So the bits that I outlined at the beginning. So firstly, I just want to kind of communicate why you already have an advantage as a STEM graduate, or when you get to that graduate stage, when you're looking for jobs outside the lab. So this is kind of more of an awareness thing. Newsflash, big bold letters. Your STEM background is not exclusively for academia. You might already know that, and that might be the reason that you're watching this presentation. But the reason I'm emphasizing this is because I know that a lot of science students and graduates almost feel like the academic route is the expected route if you're studying a science degree, and may feel some pressure to maybe do further study, or may feel like you're rebelling a bit if you don't follow that route and you kind of look at other industries. But that's definitely not the case, because the scientific world is so vast and there are so many different industries that you can work for. And there are so many opportunities outside of academia. So, as I said, academia is a great route to follow if you want to work in research. But if you know that intuitively know that that's not for you, or if you've worked in research and want to change, then just know that your STEM background and skills can be applied really well in other jobs, and you can still contribute to the scientific world without doing an academic role. So the reason that you have an advantage when you study a STEM degree and you're looking for these kind of jobs outside the lab is because, say, for example, you're looking for a job in pharma, as I mentioned that I worked in, or science communication, which is a really popular route at the moment for a lot of science grads, or research funding, which is where I work in now. You automatically have credibility because of your degree. And the reason I say that is because there are lots of graduates from other subjects who will apply to these industries as well. So you can have graduates from the humanities who are working in science communication, for example, who you would be potentially competing with for a job in that industry, but you automatically have credibility just because of your degree. And that's because you're more likely to understand the context of the work that you're doing. So if you're in that industry, you may have potentially come across the work of that industry or linked the work that you're doing in your degree to that industry while you're studying. But you're also just more likely to understand the language that they use, especially if there's technical language being used. You won't necessarily be intimidated by it, and you'll be able to pick up on that a lot faster. And then if your job then includes working more directly with scientists or engineers or tech employees, you have that credibility and relatability to them because of your background. So there's a bit around the language that they use, which I just mentioned, but also their mindset. Because what I found is when I've worked with scientists, a lot of them, as expected, will have a very analytical mindset. And so the way that they approach their work is going to be different to other employees. Obviously, that's a generalization and it won't necessarily apply to everyone, but it is a pattern that I have noticed in my experience. And you will have credibility in interacting with them because you can speak their language, because you can understand the way that they think and work. And you can basically use this to build rapport and relationships faster with your colleagues. And that is a really great thing to say in an interview. The fact that you already have that skill set, building relationships in the workplace is going to be easier for you. So you can actually say that in an interview or in your application. And then even if you don't want to apply to a STEM or direct STEM industry, like if you want to go into banking or consulting, which do use STEM skills as well, but they're not necessarily considered STEM industries, you are in high demand because you have a transferable and diverse skill set, because as I said, they will use skill sets that a lot of STEM graduates will have. So you even have an advantage in those industries as well. Okay, so going on to kind of more practical tips, I'm going to talk to you about how you can position your unique set of skills purely from your degree to make more successful job applications. So I've broken this down into a few different steps. So the first step is understanding what your transferable skills are. So you might have heard this if you've attended other careers presentations, but they're often termed soft skills or business skills as well. So they all sort of mean the same thing. I'm emphasizing this even if you've heard it before because it is absolutely crucial in today's job market, and I think it should be your key takeaway from this session. So if you think about skills that are non-technical, like effective collaboration or teamwork, building relationships at work, prioritizing your work, negotiating, influencing, those kind of more non-tangible skills, these are in such high demand from any employer that it is absolutely crucial that you are aware of what your transferable skills are. You will have plenty of transferable skills from your degree. You just need to kind of sit back and think about what they are. So what kind of tasks and projects you have done during your degree, and what skills have you used to do those projects. And you will already then have a list of things that you can talk about in an interview. So this is something that when I'm interviewing people for my team, I will base a lot of my questions around this, around these skills. So it's massively important. Then step 2 is to build your CV a certain way. So remember, this is all in the context of not necessarily having a lot or maybe not having any work experience. I would put my education in that case at the top and highlight any extracurriculars or achievements related to your education that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. And then if you have some work experience, then list this with 2 to 3 bullets under each one and make those sentences about your impact in that job that you've done. So when you're putting your education at the top, the reason I'm saying to do this is because if you don't have work experience, then your education will be the most relevant thing that the employer will look at. And then if you have some work experience, listing them with bullets on impact is a lot more powerful than listing the tasks that you have done in the job. So if you say, I have done this task in this job, it's not necessarily going to catch the eye of the employer. Whereas if you talk about an outcome that you achieved in that job or an impact that you made, and you, especially if you use numbers, then that is something that an employer will notice. If you have zero work experience, then create something called a skills-based CV, which is also sometimes called a functional CV. And so this is where instead of writing the name of the employer, the job title, and those bullets on impact, you will list the skill as the heading, and then you will list the various places you got them from. So it's like if you sat and thought about those transferable skills and then any technical skills that might be relevant for the job, then you can list those and then you can say how you got them. So what is it that you did during your education that meant that you built that skill? So then that's the way that I would build out my CV if I had no work experience. The main thing to bear in mind is you want to make it as relevant to the job as you can. And if it's not directly relevant, think about how skills could transfer to the job that you're applying for. And then the third step would be to essentially translate all your skills into interview answers. So that list of transferable skills that you've made, create an interview answer before you even, before you even apply for jobs, I would say, to do all this. Create it from each skill you have and use the STAR structure. So the STAR structure is when someone asks you a question, you will reply by describing the situation you were in, describing the task you completed, describing the action that you took, and describing the result. And you're doing that all to demonstrate that specific skill. And essentially what you have is a list to revise before each interview, so you're absolutely prepared. And obviously, if you did this before you applied for any job, then when you actually apply for a job, you could just pull out the relevant skills that match that job description and just revise those. So it kind of gives you a preparation that you can do upfront. And even though it seems like a lot of work, it will actually save you time when you are applying for jobs. Okay, so how you can save time, energy, and effort looking for the employers who want to hire STEM students like you. So there are a few ways to find STEM-related jobs. You can use Google, you can search on LinkedIn or other job websites, go to careers fairs, speak to your friends and family who work in STEM industry, so networking is a way. Once you've graduated, you could sign up to recruitment agencies who hire in STEM industries. You can also search for jobs on employment websites like Indeed. There's an endless list of ways that you can find STEM jobs. I've just made it a bit easier for you and created a career directory, which is basically a comprehensive list of places you can apply for a job outside the lab. So it's sort of a done for you sheet, and you can have instant access to a list of organizations advertising jobs for STEM grads outside the lab, save yourself a ton of time looking for a job, and basically discover the industries that want to hire STEM graduates with your exact qualifications. So if you want that, then go to outsidethelab.co.uk/directory and you can download that right away. And the last thing is something that comes up a lot, and I hear a lot, and I've seen as well, is how to escape the trap of employers asking for years of experience for what is supposed to be an entry-level role, so like a graduate level role. So have you ever seen this? Because I have seen it quite a lot, and it can be quite annoying. Kate says yes. It can be a little bit like frustrating and limits you at the first hurdle. So what I would say if you come across this, first of all, follow the 2 steps I already outlined. What I want to get across to you is that there is a lot that you have from your degree, and I almost want you to extract as much as you can and use it. Because you've invested time and money in a degree which is really valuable, because I know that there's often the sentiment that, my degree was a waste, or how can I use it in my job? But actually, the ways that I've outlined is kind of giving you the way of how you can use it to actually get a job. And once you've done that work up front, you're already in a much stronger position to apply for jobs outside the lab. Okay, and now for some other strategies. So if you don't have the work experience that they're outlining for this entry-level role, there are other sources of experience and skills that you have. So I've already mentioned how to extract that from your degree, but also if you've done any volunteering, if you have any extracurricular activities, no matter how simple, you can also think about what skills you've got from those. But obviously, again, always think about the relevance and or the transference to the job that you're applying for. You can talk about personal life situations as well during the application process, as long as it's appropriate, and again, it's as relevant as you can make it. Your hobbies or reading or courses you've taken on the side. Basically, just think about in your life all the sources of experience that you've had that give you these skills that can be transferred over to these jobs. And if you follow all of the steps, like you actually do all of the steps that I've outlined so far, you will have, I can almost guarantee you, you will have a huge list of CV fillers and also interview answers basically ready to go. The second strategy is actually something that you should don't stop yourself from doing. So don't stop yourself from applying for jobs, even if you don't tick 100% of the job requirements. So again, this is more of a mindset shift. You don't need to tick everything on the job advert in order to apply for that job. In the non-academic job market especially, it is all about positioning yourself in the optimal light. So using all of these skills that I've just described, transferable skills, thinking about all the sources where you have experience, and using that to position yourself in the best light to show that you could do the job, even if you don't tick all of the requirements. And then if you've done all this reflection, you're in a strong position to apply for those roles. And something to bear in mind, remember, there is someone on the other side called a hiring manager who is hiring for that role, and they are not always good at writing job descriptions. This is kind of an insider insight. They're not always good at writing them. So bear in mind that what they put on the description, if they seem to be asking for a lot of experience, but they're saying it's an entry-level role, then it might be their mistake in the way that they've written it. So it's more just for you to bear in mind that it won't always necessarily be 100% reflective of what they're asking for. So this requires sort of experience of when you're applying for jobs to actually spot that. But it means that they will very often consider you, and you don't want to miss opportunities. Yeah, Elisa's seen that too. So yeah, on being, on the hiring manager side as well, they will, I will often consider candidates who don't fit all the criteria. And from the candidate side, you don't want to miss opportunities to apply for jobs just because you think that you haven't ticked everything. And also, a lot of people don't do this, but there is always a contact email address on a job description or a job advert. Often it's for the recruiter or someone in HR. And so contact them to check what requirements they're flexible on, because I did this once for a job where they actually, I think, asked that they definitely wanted someone with a particular qualification. And then when I contacted them, they said, oh, we'll consider you even if you don't have it. And that's just because I contacted them. So that can be really great. And sometimes you can even have a conversation, like a call with them, to discuss the role. They're often willing to do that. And I don't think a lot of people do take advantage of that. And then distinguish between the essential and desirable criteria on a job description. So usually they will list what's absolutely essential and what's desirable. So again, if you don't have that work experience, then don't worry so much about the desirable. You might still be able to tick some of it. Sometimes you do. But basically prioritize the essential. And even then, I would say to follow this rule and not worry about ticking 100% of it, but think about transferable skills and whether you tick maybe 50 to 70% maybe. That's maybe the ballpark that you can look for. When I applied for the job, my last job, they wanted someone with a very specific master's degree. Now, I don't have a master's, but that's what they put on their job description. I didn't have that and I still got the job. So it's just a bit of a kind of mindset shift and judgment call that you'll learn to make as you do more job applications. But I'm telling you now so that you can maybe have that awareness and keep an eye out for these things as you're applying. Okay, last strategy if you have gaps in your experience and the experience that they're asking for, you can do quick courses on the side to build skills and knowledge. So this is really widely available nowadays because of the internet, because of people being able to create content online to support other people's learning. So there are some platforms like, I'm just giving some examples, there's probably a lot more, but Udemy, Coursera, FutureLearn, Open University are just some examples. And they often have courses on such a wide variety of skills and topics that you can do often for free and often online in your own time. They cover technical skills, they cover soft skills. And even though it might seem like a little bit of a quick fix, I'm not saying to do this for everything on a job description, but if you have gaps and you can find courses, for example, that you can do on the side to almost tick that box, then for me, as a hiring manager, I would think it shows proactivity. It shows that you're willing to learn. Even though it may not mean that you have completely ticked off that skill, you will automatically develop some awareness of it and some grounding, and you can talk about that in an interview. So I think that this could be a way to quickly fill in those gaps that you might have. Again, maybe if it was only for a couple of gaps that you have, not necessarily for everything. Okay, so just a reminder, so Karen speaks about LinkedIn Learning courses too. Yeah, thousands to choose from, exactly. There is so much out there at the moment, so I definitely think it's something to take advantage of. So just to remind you, the STEM Careers Directory is available for you to have instant access to a list of organisations advertising jobs for STEM grads outside the lab. So you will save time and effort looking for a job and discover the industries that want to hire STEM graduates just like you. So if you go to outsidethelab.co.uk/directory, you can download that. And that is me done. So I am open for questions. I'll try and stop sharing.
Gosh, it's strange actually. You've resonated so much actually of what I have learned over time since I left a particular job within the military. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, I think it's rebounding. Let me turn it down. I was explaining to Alyssa and Carolyn that you know, since I left in January 2020, I've had a mixture of responses, which I've learned a lot from to do with interviewing and things like that. So I have addressed a lot of things that you said, things like how you format your CV, how you tailor it, and things like that. So this is really good because I think it's just cements everything that but I know I got some issues from the feedback, only that not negatively really, it's just that lack of experience in interviewing, if you see what I mean. When you come, so I'm a mature student, so I've come from a job that I was in for 20 odd years, and you don't interview, you don't. So I hadn't done interviewing since I was like very, very young, like 20 odd, you know. So it's so that's the things I'm going to talk with Lisa on Monday, is going through a mock interview and just try and pick up what exactly, is there anything else that's wrong. So yeah, thank you, that's been really, really good. So I'm sorry I haven't got any questions, it's sort of blown my mind a bit, I suppose.
No, that's okay. No worries. No, thank you for your comments. And yeah, with interviews and with all of the stages, actually, it is about practice, and getting feedback is great. That's exactly the way that I would approach it. Mock interviews are great because you can think of your answers in your head or write them down, but until you actually speak them out and have someone else hear them and reflect that back to you, you won't know how you'll articulate yourself. So I think that's a really good thing to do.
I think it's and I've had the situation where I've stopped actually emailing people beforehand, actually, because sometimes I've emailed them and they've said, yeah, put it in, and then to turn me down. And then when I haven't, they've actually given me an interview. It's really strange. I don't know whether that's just coincidence.
That is a strange
Yeah, I've got
thing.
the
Yeah, maybe.
interviews. I'm getting the interviews. I'm just need a bit of working on the old interviews.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and
Yeah,
it's good that you've identified like this stage that you feel like you need to work on, because
yeah,
sometimes like I know a lot of people who like I keep getting to the interview stage and then that's where they feel like they're falling
yeah,
down. So it's good that you know that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, but that is really useful because that's the area I'm looking to go into, is things like, it's possibly a bit out of the norm. I am interested in a physician's associate job within the NHS, but also there are other avenues as well, isn't there? It's not just the NHS. There's so many businesses out there, isn't there? So
Yeah. Hmm. There are loads of options.
yeah,
It's just, there is another aspect of just also being aware of what options there are out there in terms of the jobs that you
yeah,
can do. And sometimes
yeah,
it's so hard until you're in the industry. Like when I stepped into the pharma
yeah,
industry, oh my goodness, the
yeah,
types of roles that you can do that are still linked to science, I would not have known until I started working there. So it
yeah,
can be overwhelming as well. And then it's so when you
yeah,
take that first step into an industry, then that's when you kind of a whole world opens up for you. So it's just
yeah,
about
yeah.
taking the
And
first.
I think as well, isn't it, when you're in there, you suddenly think, well, which bit do you want? Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because
Yeah. Hmm.
when you have got actual extensive working history, I think you sort of start getting a bit confused. So I think that's why,
Hmm.
yeah, it's going to be really good on Monday when I sort of, then we can
Yeah.
see what break down what,
Uh-huh.
um, so yeah, thank you. No, it's great because it's not a waste of time coming on here, because at least we can see what is actually going on out there
Hmm.
in this side of things from a recruitment
Yeah.
point of view, if you see what I mean,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
and what
Absolutely.
people are
Um,
after.
I'm just jumping in because I think Urania's either got her
Oh,
hand up.
sorry, Rania.
Sorry, no, it's okay. I wasn't quite sure if she's got her hand up or whether she's lowered it, but just in case.
Yeah, I did have a question, but I mean, the conversation was very interesting, so I don't mind listening to it.